Yo, class changes? Yo, did Affliction get anything? Okay, hold on. Oh. Well, I mean, hey, 6%'s not nothing. At least they know we exist. You know, something, something. What's up, guys? So with 10.2 finally here, I felt like it was definitely a time for me to do an update to my last video, which was the guide. I've been doing a ton of keys over on the Twitch, twitch.tv/arson. Obviously, you should come hang out. And in those, I've been trying to get as much information as I possibly can before I made this next video. So I feel like I got a decent idea of what I want to talk about for this one, including like our stats and what gear I like, my favorite current build and keys. We did get a 6% buff, so you know that does kind of help a little bit, but spoiler alert, I still think we need a little bit of love, especially when you compare us to like Demo and some other things like that. But I do want to go over all that stuff with you guys. And then maybe at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what I think we should, maybe what we need. I think it's some things that I've mentioned in previous videos, but, you know, maybe we can talk about it again. Before we jump into it, though, guys, I do want to let you know, I have started Patreon. If that's something that interests you, you should check it out. There's a bunch of cool stuff in there, I think, like early access to videos, you know, a special Discord role, a help channel, maybe a free VOD review, depending on what you want to do. Either way, I think there's some cool stuff in there for you guys if you want to help support the channel. No matter what, though, I always thank you so much for the support. Let's jump right into it, guys. Also, we hit 2,000 subscribers over here on the YouTube. So if you don't want to miss out on new Affliction videos and more Warlock videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Jump right into it. I kind of want to just talk about gear and like trinkets and weapons and stats and all that kind of stuff, because I went over in the guide, but I do think a few things have changed a little bit as far as maybe what you're crafting and what kind of stats you're looking for. So the big one, I think, is the weapon. So in the guide, I kind of talked about maybe doing crafted weapon. While I do still think crafted weapon is okay, but I honestly think it's more important now to maybe get your 2 embellishments online and go for the farmable weapon, which is Iridol. So I have a Mythic Track Iridol that I pulled out of my vault on week 2, which is insanely lucky. And I think my loot luck is like completely burned on this one item, but that's okay. You can get this out of Dawn of the Infinite's Fall, Galakrond's Fondle, or whatever you call it. But you can farm this weapon from that dungeon. It might take you a bunch of runs, but you can farm this weapon. So I would highly recommend that you focus this weapon and not waste your spark on a weapon. If you don't want to do that, you can obviously just craft a weapon. It's all good. So probably just do haste mastery in my opinion. But this weapon is really, really good. It's got that secondary effect on it, which, you know, as with an enemy gets below 35% health, you can do a big hit of damage to them. I've seen this thing hit for like upwards of over a couple million in keys, or over a million, I should say, not a couple million. But let's see. Here's the Extinction Blast. It hit in that key. It hit for 1 million. There was like this is like a Black Rook, so there's like an amp phase that happens. So you know that 2 million or doesn't really count. In this key though, it hit. Let's see what its highest was again. It had like a 1.1 million hit in there. 4 of them. 4 crits that were like over 1 million-ish. So it can hit really hard for just a secondary effect on a weapon that essentially has no downside to it, right? And it's haste verse, which is honestly pretty good for us right now. So as far as our stats are concerned, another thing that I talked about in the guide, right, was our haste is kind of going to be a little out of control this season, and we're going to be getting into like diminishing returns area. You can see I am just up against that diminishing returns penalty right now. I have 30% haste. Again, with my mastery, I have 95% mastery, so I'm getting really, really close to getting into that diminishing returns of my haste and my mastery. I personally don't mind playing with over 30% haste, but as far as my gear is set up right now, I have been dropping a little bit of my haste to pick up a little bit more crit and verse in other spots, which this weapon kind of helps in that area too, right? So, Iridol is great. The other weapon that a lot of people were talking about that I talked about in the guide too is Dreambinder. So, real quick, Dreambinder drops in the raid, right? And it comes from, it's a rare loot item, but it comes from Naime. And it's haste mastery, which is not bad. It does have another secondary effect on it, which is also okay. I currently don't have one, so I haven't tested myself. But as far as I'm concerned, and as far as my sims are concerned, jumping over to the gear real quick, though, you can see that Dreambinder and Iridol are really similar to each other. This is a patchwork, 1 boss, 4 minutes fight for me. My 489 Iridol versus a 489 Dreambinder. I'm not really in a mythic raiding guild, so a 489 Dreambinder is something that I probably will not see for quite a while. My guild raids 1 night a week, so you know, we do some mythic bosses, but I'm not really in a mythic progression guild or anything like that. I mainly just do keys. So If you do happen to get a Mythic Iridol or a Mythic, Dreambinder, whichever one you get first, in my opinion, they're both very similar to each other. Stats-wise, they're a little bit different, but as far as the on-use and all that kind of stuff, at least if you're looking at my character right now, it's 800 DPS. They're really not, in my opinion, not that big of a difference between each other. So whichever one you can get is totally fine. If you get a Mythic one or you get a Mythic Iridol or Mythic Dreambinder, I think they're okay. Definitely sim, but for the most part, if you're worried about something like that, I think you're okay. Jump back over. I do want to talk a little bit about trinkets. So I've tested a few different trinkets, and I talked about a few different ones in the guide too. Currently, still my favorite to play in a lot of situations is just Branch. Especially because I've been playing a lot without Darkglare recently, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Balefire Branch is just 1 minute 30. It kind of just lines up with all of our stuff all the time. Feels pretty nice to just ship it whenever you want, basically. Have it for pretty much every boss. Might even have it multiple times on a boss, right? Spindle is really good in single target and is extremely awkward in AoE situations, especially Mythic Plus. Especially this week. This week's Volcanic right now. Getting a full channel of this thing is just one of the most annoying things in this game, in my opinion. Especially for Affliction, because usually in our setup, it takes, 15-ish seconds around there to get all your stuff going and, getting everything going. And sometimes weaving this spindle into that and finding the right area to drop it is just, it's really, really awkward. Even in single target, it's really awkward because you'll do like this and then you'll go into draining. So it's just so much channeling and so much standing in one spot with the amount of like things that are on the ground and volcanic and just things you need to dodge and effects. It's sometimes very difficult to find a lot of value out of this trinket, especially as Affliction. I think as demo it's not as bad, but I've noticed definitely a downside of it this season. Seastar is one of the only other ones I've gotten so far this season, so it's a pretty decent trinket. The other one that's pretty good is the Blood from Everbloom. That's another decent trinket that's super farmable if you want to. It's kind of rare, but it's another like just decent passive one until you can't get it. The combination that I'm currently looking for is either Branch and Pips like I talked about in the guide, or Spindle plus the Beacon trinket from T-Swift, right? So Suncaller. Those two together, it's also, I think, the best for Demo too. I think that's best for pretty much every spec. But in Mythic Plus, both those trinkets together, pretty solid. Spindle is the only one that I'm a little like 50-50 on. I still think it's a great trinket, but it's a little awkward to use sometimes with Affliction. Suncaller is a great trinket. It's just extra free damage every 2 minutes, right? And you just it's double on use, but it's not that big a deal. Until you can get those, we actually have a lot of decent trinkets this season, right? Music Box is okay as a passive trinket if you don't have anything else. Corrupted Starlight's not my favorite personally. I think if you run Starlight with Branch, it's just far too much mastery. I would not recommend doing that. There's another on use or like passive trinket in Darkheart that sims really high for me. Gnarl Root sims extremely high. So I'd be careful with the sims on that. I think in single target it's okay. But if that's all you got, nothing wrong with that. The big thing I want to talk about is a lot of our trinkets have this, or a lot of the trinkets this season have a lot of this stats instead of main stat on them. So it'll be like Verse or Mastery. Be very careful with that, because obviously if that's all you got, it's fine. But some of these trinkets make our stats really high compared to, how we were in the past. And so you will get into that diminishing returns problem. So just something to be aware of. Obviously the raid trinkets, but if you can't get those, we have a decent amount of options this season. So in like AoE sims, which I'm doing like 8 targets, 1 minute, which has become kind of my standard for as far as Mythic Plus is concerned. It's kind of just what I've been using. I still do 5 target sims, but this is kind of just what I've been doing consistently, get an idea. This trinket sims insanely high. This trinket is saying it's like a 200k DPS increase for me. So, or in this other one, it's like, I think it's somewhere around like 50k DPS increase or something like that. And again, 8 bosses, 1 minute. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's a 3-minute cooldown, right? And it gives you like all of this secondary stat in that little window. Basically, what I want to talk about is when you're running sims, this is something you kind of need to think about, especially as Mythic Plus is concerned. This looks insane. And I think it is in 3 minutes. Like, this is actually really good. But over the course of a key, how many of those big pulls are you going to have in some situations? And would you get more value out of having a branch more frequently? Does that make sense? Like, the sim might not show that information as easily, because in this, it's just saying, in 1 minute, if I'm attacking 8 mobs, what gives me the most damage, right? And of course, a 3-minute cooldown that gives you all of that is going to give you a lot of damage in those 3 minutes, or in that 1 minute. But it's not as consistent as maybe the branch and stuff like that. So just something to be aware of. I do think this trinket is actually pretty good, but I don't really care for playing with a 3-minute cooldown trinket. I'm going to continue to play with it this week and get some more ideas on it. But I kind of just want to talk about when you're looking at sim information, be extremely aware of stuff like that, where it's like in a sim, it might look insanely good. And it might actually be pretty decent in some situations. But to also be aware that, you know, it's not always the best in other ones. This is even with Dread Touch. It's showing this much AoE with Dread Touch, not even with Doom Blossom, right? So, and you compare it with this with Doom Blossom, right? So I kind of just want to talk about that just briefly. One of the other things I want to talk about too, as far as like stats are concerned, we have a lot of like rings and necklaces this season that are like heavy stats in one direction. So we have like this haste with like heavy mastery, or this haste with, or like heavy haste with like low verse, right? And then again, like this necklace. So I think these are actually really good for us, because a lot of times our haste or whatever is, you know, right next to that, you know, over diminishing returns are right there. So using some of these items to kind of sway one of our other stats in the other direction is actually really solid. So my current favorite that I'm liking right now is this haste mastery ring from Darkheart Thicket, in combination with either this necklace from Darkheart Thicket as well, this crit mastery necklace, or there's another like a haste crit necklace from Throne that kind of, if you don't have this one, you know, basically what I'm saying though is use these like heavy swing items to bring some of your stats back in line. Definitely be aware of how much haste you have, definitely be aware of how much mastery you have, and then we're trying, in my opinion, we're trying to pick up more crit and then a little bit more verse. I think crit is personally a little bit better for us in some situations, but I think these two are actually really similar. Obviously sim your character and see what's best for you, but for me, I've been kind of leaning towards getting as much haste and mastery as I can. Actually, a little bit more haste, even in diminishing returns haste, but that's kind of my own personal playstyle. There's a ring that also drops from Blackrock Hold. This ring that's got like heavy crit. This is actually a very solid ring for us, especially when we start getting into this like haste mastery like category. I think this is one of our best rings. So keep an eye out for that one. If you have that one, that's actually a pretty solid ring for us. But essentially, be extremely aware, like I talked about with your stats, as far as diminishing returns are concerned, but still haste mastery and then go crit verse. All right, lastly, with the whole trinket situation and gear, I kind of want to just like quickly go over my drop optimizer that I've set up for. This is just like a single target drop optimizer for keys, and this is like an AoE drop optimizer for keys. Just to kind of give you an idea of what my character is looking like for like what trinkets it suggests and like that kind of stuff. So again, like I said, this Oak Heart's Gnarled Root in single target is, you know, a decent little upgrade for me. Same with like the blood. This is all simming at 43, right? So I'm just like whatever you can get from just maxing out an item from like, you know, 17 and above, right? A hero track item. It says myth, but it's hero track, right? So these trinkets in single target are actually pretty solid. I think this trinket is actually very good in both single target and AoE. See, it's like a 1% AoE as well for me. The other one, obviously this trinket sims very high. Branch is still really good. The other one that's really good in single target and is actually pretty decent is this Vessel. That's another very solid trinket. Again, Mirror Fraction Tomorrows. I think this is always going to sim a little high, like we talked about, the whole 3-minute cooldown thing. But I kind of just wanted to briefly go past these real quick. You can pause and look if you really want to, but I kind of wanted to go through, like, there's a lot of solid trinket options for us, and I personally don't think that there is a, you know, perfect combination other than like Spindle with like Suncolor is actually pretty solid. But outside of those two, getting a decent on use like Branch or something like that, and then a decent passive one, you know, run your own draw optimizer. But I'm kind of leaning towards like the Branch and like Blood personally. Haven't gotten to see one yet though. But I just wanted to quickly go over that. You can kind of see from the raid too, like, you know, AoE is another like big heavy 2-minute. Pips is still pretty good. Suncolor, all that kind of stuff. Single target, similar kind of situation, right? So I kind of just want to briefly go past those real quick, give you an idea of like, there's a lot of solid trinkets even for my character. So sim your character, use Draw Optimizer if you can, but a lot of trinkets are pretty solid for Affliction right now. Jumping back over, I do want to touch quickly on crafted items. So I talked a little bit about in the guide as well. I'm going to be referencing the guide a bunch. So if you haven't seen that, maybe go check that video out. I'll probably put it like up in the corner or whatever. It's just my 10.2 guide. You can jump around in that all you want. But in that, I talked about what embellishment I currently was planning on running, and I am kind of sticking with that right now. I am running Verdant Conduit. From all the sims I've done and all the testing I've done, Shadow Flame is a little bit of an upgrade in single target, but I don't think it's as big of an upgrade in AoE. So it's still something I'm testing. I am still testing it, especially in a group that has more than one person running any of the new conduits or the new embellishments, because as it says in the second part, for nearby ally teller to the dream of 2, the bonus grows more powerful. I haven't gotten enough testing with this because not enough people are running those embellishments yet. It's only like week 3. So We can definitely, you know, I'll report back on that. We'll keep talking about that kind of stuff. But if you want something that's just, you don't want to worry about it, you can just pick Shadow Flame. That's totally fine. I think Shadow Flame is the best still for Demo too. If you're kind of playing all three specs, I think Shadow Flame's totally fine. I still kind of want to see how Verdant Conduit feels though. You can see in this, which one's this one? This is a, if it'll load up, this is a 21 Dawn of the Infinite. My Verdant Conduit had a 48% uptime, right? And I don't think there was anybody else running that. So, you know, pretty interesting. If it lowers the active amount of it, if you have somebody else, I'm curious what that percentage is. I think this one was a similar type situation. Verdant Conduit 48% again, right? So I personally think it's really good for Affliction because it just gives us extra stats. I think it's like 300 intellect or something like that. Or sorry, 300 like of a secondary stat every time it procs for like 10 seconds. And it procs pretty consistent. I mean, you saw 50% of the dungeon is up. That's pretty solid for an embellishment. Like I said, Shadow Flame is still really solid too, though. So if you're kind of 50-50, you don't really want to go back and forth, nothing wrong with that at all. So next, let's talk about the build. So in the guide, I also talked about playing without Darkglare and a lot of keys and enjoying that playstyle. And I do still agree with that too. For the same reason I talked about previously with the whole trinket thing and simulations and stuff like that, Darkglare does sim higher in sims in most situations. However, in my own experience, most of the time, getting value in Darkglare from keys is extremely weird. On Fortified, I think you can get a little bit more value in bigger trash pulls, and then on Tyrannical, I think you can get more value on bosses, right? But essentially what I want to talk about is like, in a lot of these keys right now, unless you're doing 24s, 25s, or higher or something like that, I feel like getting a lot of value out of your Darkglare every 2 minutes in some of these dungeons is extremely rare. Either the mob that you're getting everything set up on has little health comparatively to the other mobs around it, even if you pick like the higher health mob, or if you have something like a Demon Hunter and a BM Hunter in your group, or the two of them together, and you get your full setup going on one mob, by the time you ship your Darkglare, that mob is probably going to be dead. Which means that your Darkglare significantly loses all of its damage, right? Because the Darkglare scales itself based off of the dots that are on whatever target it's shipped on, right? And you don't really have control over it to change it to other targets. So basically what I'm trying to say is, I feel like in a situation where you can get your full setup on your Darkglare and get it going, it can be good. However, finding those situations, even in like keys where you have an AUG and another DPS, which I still think is probably our best situation right now as a like setup class. But either way, it doesn't really matter. Getting those situations is really rare for Affliction right now, and I think it's one of our biggest problems is since we are this like setup class, and you're competing with all these classes like Demon Hunters, BM Hunters, even like Demo, Rat Paladins, Rogues, a lot of these classes that have what I like to call like instant upfront snap damage, you just don't have time to get your setup off, right? And in that situation, there's really nothing you can do there except just, I guess, go next on the next pull. If we do get our setup off and that pull lives long enough to where we can actually just finish, and I'm not even talking about like very long, like 20 something seconds, then we can do some decent damage. But that's definitely been an issue we've seen this past couple weeks in my personal preference. So that's one of the main reasons I've been dropping Darkglare. I do think these three talents are actually pretty close with each other, and this is kind of the floater point in my personal preference right now in keys. If you don't want to mess around with it, you can absolutely just pick up Darkglare. Nothing wrong with that at all. I think Wrath is still pretty decent in some keys where you can keep the uptime up, like I talked about in the guide. So it's like Darkheart, Throne, Waycrest. Atal is not bad as well. But still finding value in Wrath sometimes is a little bit tough. Same with Dark Harvest. So in my opinion, the build is basically this and then this one floater point, right? So it's kind of what I talked about in the guide. But my current favorite right now has either been just running Darkglare or just running Dark Harvest. Those have been the two that are my favorite, personally. I'm still very torn on Darkglare, and I have tried to make it work so many times, but it just feels bad. Because you'll finish a key. I don't have a Darkglare on my stuff right now. You'll finish a key, though, and I promise you, your Darkglare will be lower than Fel Barrage. And majority of the time, it has been lower than Extinction Blast, which is our weapon effect. For a 2-minute cooldown, that is our main class cooldown, like I've talked about in so many videos now, it feels so bad. So hopefully something gets fixed with that. Hopefully maybe see a little bit of change with that. I don't really know what exactly I would want them to do for Darkglare, but what I would like to see, which is something I'll jump into now, I guess, I would prefer if Darkglare was maybe a choice node and we could maybe get Dark Soul back. I think Dark Soul Misery, which is just like, if you didn't play then, it was, I'll put it up on the screen, it was like a 30% haste amp. Whenever you push it, it'd be a 2-minute cooldown, 30% haste. If that was a choice node with Darkglare, and then maybe these all connected with it somehow, you know, if you had Darkglare, it was like this, and if you had, you know, Dark Soul, it would change these to be something more interactive with that. I think that would be great. I think that would be significantly better for the class. I do think it would be a little weird with our current build setup, but either way, I think getting Dark Soul back would be significantly more helpful than what Darkglare is as a cooldown right now. There's definitely some more things that I would like to see happen with the class. Just jumping into like some of the things that I think would be good for us going forward. We obviously suffer from a little bit more of a setup class, which is totally fine. I don't think that needs to change. I think that's inherent to our classes. We are just a little bit more setup. If our setup was a little bit shorter, you know, maybe if Vile Taint applied a little more things. Everyone complains to me about Siphon Life, so maybe if Siphon Life was worked into the system a little bit, maybe Vile Taint applied Siphon Life, or if Corruption applied Siphon Life, or something like that, right? That would be amazing, something like that. The other thing I think our biggest problem is right now, in my opinion though, next to our setup being a little bit complicated, is our shard generation, especially in single target, is abysmal. You will have times where you just generate no shards, like for an extended period of time, which feels really, really bad. And it's one of the reasons why I think Crescendo is essentially mandatory this season, and why I think this is the floater point, not this one. We find ourselves too frequently without a shard with our tier set bonus active, and it just feels terrible. So if I had to change anything, it would probably be first something to do with shard generation, either increasing how frequently we can get shards or something like that, or even remove or tie. If we're all based around getting shards off of Drain Soul when something dies, that could be looked at, because that is extremely difficult in a lot of situations, and doesn't help us at all in the front half of a key, right? So shard generation, I think, is our biggest problem right now. Hopefully we see some more changes, all that good stuff. They do seem to be making changes. I mean, we did get a 6% buff, which is definitely something. It's not nothing, but I would like to see more when it comes to that. All right, guys, that about wraps it up. So hopefully I covered everything. I was really holding off on this one, trying to wait and see if we maybe got some more changes, considering there's another like hotfix patch, whatever you want to call it, coming on the 5th. But as of recording this, it doesn't seem like anything like that's going to happen right now. So if anything does happen, don't worry, I'll be able to update you guys. Be sure to subscribe, all that good stuff. And if there was anything that I didn't cover, be sure to join the Discord. There's a link in the description, or come by the Twitch and hang out, man. I try and answer as many questions as I can. Twitch.tv/arson. But next to that, I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for all the support. I got a bunch more videos coming real soon. I'm trying to do a video a week, so we'll see. I do have some key videos coming really soon as well, so keep an eye out for that. So until the next one, guys, I will see you then. Thank you so much for all the support. Thanks for watching.